Hi everyone, this is Dr. Nitin Choda, and in this training I'm going to talk to you about the pros and cons of the $2,000 per month proposed stimulus, which is a version of universal basic income. They actually tried something like this in Finland. They actually called it Finland's basic income trial. So what they did was they identified 2,000 people and over a period of 2 years gave them just under 600 euros, no strings attached, and the money was not taxable. And here's what they found, and this was in the New York Times. It said a basic income made recipients happier that they were on unemployment benefits. A 2-year government experiment found, but it did not, as proponents had hoped, make them more likely to work. Now remember, this was a very small trial. This was a very limited trial. Something like this has never been done for hundreds of millions of people. So there are a lot of unknowns. There are a lot of variables. Let me go over some of the pros and cons, and then you can make a decision for yourself. But before I get into that, let me tell you that in 2013, there was a study done by the World Bank, which basically found that when people that were poor with a lower economic status were given basic income, they did not. In fact, less than 1% of them used that money for booze and things that necessarily weren't healthy for them. And only 10% of those individuals reduced their working hours because they had to take care of their children, because now they had the opportunity to look after their children because there was some basic income. So there are pros and cons. Let's start with the biggest concern that people have, the biggest con, if you will. And people believe that universal basic income will facilitate passive behavior, will make people lazy and less productive. So again, it can make people passive, lazy, and less productive. The other way to look at this is it can actually boost economic output. It can boost productivity. It can encourage someone to maybe go back to school, to start a company, to do things like contribute to society, or maybe even not worry about money and find a job that they like. Because remember, the fundamental aspect of universal basic income is that the payment is guaranteed and it is on top of any other income that you might earn. And in the United States, $12,000 a year is considered, anybody earning less than $12,000 a year is considered to be below the poverty level. So anything over $1,000 a month, which is $12,000 a year, would be sufficient to get someone out of poverty, which, by the way, it's interesting that the $2,000 per month stimulus plan from Tim Ryan and from Ro Khanna, one's from Ohio, the other's from California. It's interesting that proposed number of $2,000 per month per individual earning less than $130,000 a year. So that's something to look at, that these individuals would get that money for 6 months. So think of this as sort of a step in the direction of universal basic income. A proposal is what I should say. So again, let's get back to the pros and cons. So the biggest con is the person will stop working, the person will be lazy, the person will be unproductive, and the pro is that the person will actually have higher economic output. Now that's the first thing. The second is that this would create a ceiling of income, if you will. In other words, the person now gets $2,000 and doesn't really want to do anything more, which is similar, I suppose, to the first point, but that was the con. The pro, which is a more positive way, which is what proponents of universal basic income would say, is that this creates a floor for people from which they can rise up and do more. Because in our country, if someone's stuck in a vicious cycle of poverty, if someone is not able to get out of that cycle, they're essentially spinning their wheels for years and years, decades, maybe over the course of their entire lifetime. So the hypothesis, the belief, the hope is that this $2,000 a month, this proposed stimulus would actually give that person a floor when they previously had none. Now, let's talk about the third thing, inflation. So the big con is, oh my God, where's the money going to come from? How are we going to pay for this? We're going to have to print money. Suddenly a gallon of milk will cost $300. And that's what people are really worried about. Now, the way to look at this is that obviously the money has to come from somewhere. How the money comes about, from where it comes, is going to be different for every country. For example, it may not be politically viable to cut the defense budget. It may not be politically viable in the United States to cut welfare programs like Social Security, but it may or may not even be necessary, but it may not be politically viable to increase taxes on the rich, increase taxes on big corporations, because they have all these big lobbying efforts in Washington. So where the money comes from is actually going to depend on the state of the country, the welfare programs within the country, what's politically feasible, what's the average revenue, what's the average income level of the people living in that country. So it's going to be different for every single person. But one thing is for sure, it is possible according to many studies, to fund this if adjustments are made elsewhere. Now, should there be universal basic income in addition to something like Social Security? I don't know. But one of the ways to fund universal basic income would be to make adjustments in other programs. Again, whether this is viable or not, whether this is politically dangerous or whether this is politically something that can be done, that really depends from one country to another. There is no one size fits all approach for every country, just like there's no one size fits all approach for every human being. In fact, when I was reading some of the comments in the previous training, I noticed that some individuals, live in New York City and do jobs where the cost of living is higher. Whereas, I got comments from all over the country, someone living in, let's say, Arkansas, Alabama, or South Carolina, they wouldn't need as much money as a person in New York City. But then the question arises, should they get less money simply because they live in an area where the cost of living is lower? So these are all important aspects that that people are going to talk about, that people are going to want clarity on. And I don't think we'll have a perfect solution, because the idea is to keep improving, the idea is to keep having progress, and perfection is something that that you try to get towards. And in case you haven't seen my previous video on the genesis of the $2,000 a month proposed stimulus plan and where it's heading, I recommend you check out that video, because I talk about the significant difference in wealth, the wealth disparity that exists in our country. Now, also a recent study showed that a universal basic income of at least $1,000 a month, which again raises someone above the poverty line, actually allowed individuals who were poorer to spend more money. Because imagine if someone is now able to go to a restaurant, is able to go out there and spend more money, is able to go out there and go to a game. Imagine if someone could do this. That would actually boost the economy and boost gross domestic product, boost GDP by as much as 12%. Because there would be more people spending more money, because that money would go back into the system. I remember seeing another comment in one of the previous trainings that, this money comes in and people will go shopping. Yeah, that's fine. I mean, when you get this extra money, you can do whatever you want with it. If you want, you can save it. If you want, you can invest it in the stock market. You can go out there and buy stuff. You can go out and buy yourself better food. You can go and buy yourself better clothes. You can go and pretty much do whatever you want. You can go and get an education. All of these things would boost the economy, because at the end of the day, money simply goes from point A to point B. What the universal basic income would do is simply increase the money in circulation and reallocate it from one place to another. And if this is done without printing more money, then that can mitigate the problem of inflation. Will it absolutely prevent inflation? I'm not sure, but there are ways to achieve this. That's my point. The whole idea is to reduce fear, is to reduce suffering, is to reduce anxiety, and is to reduce overall sense of discomfort for a vast portion of the population that's struggling and living paycheck to paycheck. Another thing that people are worried about, and this comes under the cons category, is what's going to happen to the low paying jobs. So the concern is there going to be a garbage man? What's going to happen to those who work in mines? What's going to happen to those who work in the sewer department? What's going to happen to farmers? Are they not going to want to do their work? The con is, the argument against universal basic income is that those individuals won't want to do the work. Now the pro is that those individuals would negotiate higher salaries, would basically do work that they enjoyed, would basically want better benefits and better incentives to stay in that job. One of the other things people are concerned about, and this is one of the cons, is that there'll be an imbalance between work and life. The whole work-life balance will get disrupted because people will no longer be engaged at work. The fact is, a majority of people are stuck in jobs that they don't like, and if there was a universal basic income, then individuals would be more likely to pursue jobs that they like and more likely to be engaged at work, because now they're doing work because they enjoy it. They're doing work because they want to, not because they have to. So the work-life balance with universal basic income can actually improve, and people can be happier, people can be less stressed, people can be less worried about their socio-economic problems. In fact, it'll elevate people's socio-economic status, because now the person who is working because they want to and not because they have to now has a higher socio-economic status, feels more comfortable, and is more likely to contribute to society, and they're happy about the work that they do. Because fundamentally, all of us want meaning. All of us are in a search for meaning. and therefore will pursue more meaningful work and will make our work matter that much more. One of the other big cons of the universal basic income or the $2,000 per month proposed stimulus approach is the dependence on big government. Now, this one I have to agree with, because if something like this were to happen, then if one major policy would impact drive the whole economy, would essentially restructure the economy as we know it, and if some welfare programs were cut or eliminated, then this one big thing would essentially be under the control of the government, which would mean that there could be a populist who offers to raise the universal basic income. There could be someone who offers to take it away, and this could be fraught with political dangers and political ramifications that could further divide our country. So this is something that is, in my opinion, a valid concern, because if the government is able to provide a universal basic income, and if that's something that now people depend on, that people simply rely on, and that people become accustomed to, then they will never ever want to have it reduced or want to have it taken away from them. Just like the battle for Social Security, which is an entitlement program, is something that it's fraught with political dangers to try and make adjustments to that or take it away. Now, I have to be honest with you, this $2,000 a month proposed stimulus plan will not solve all the problems. I mentioned this earlier. What if someone lives in Arkansas, Alabama, South Carolina, and what if someone lives in New York City, in Los Angeles? What if someone lives in places that are much, much more expensive? The cost of living, the standard of living, and the lifestyle that we live affects how much money we need to go about our daily lives. Universal basic income is not going to be able to tackle that, because we can't have a situation where someone literally moves out of expensive cities, or someone is forced to move away from one area to another because of the universal basic income that they get. So this is something that there is no clear solution at this point, because this is something also that impacts a lot of people. So at the end of the day, before I give you my final conclusion and my opinion on this, the question we need to ask ourselves is universal basic income or the proposed $2,000 a month stimulus, is it the end? Is it the solution for poverty? Is it a new financial utopia? Is it a new socio-economic utopia for all of us? I'm going to give you my opinion in just a second, but if you appreciated the research that went into this video, because I think I spent about 6 hours to prepare for this video and then produce it for you guys, and by the way, it takes several hours to add all the captions and everything to this video. So if you appreciated it, please just take a moment to click the like button, to click the subscribe button, and definitely leave your comments below, because I read every single comment. So please click the like and subscribe button. That would mean a lot to me. And if you got a lot out of this video, if you learned something new, then please go ahead and do that. But is this the solution to all our financial, to all our social problems, or is it just a dream? Is it something that will never come to pass? The fact is, something like this has a lot of potential, but we don't know for sure whether it's going to work, because it hasn't been done on a mass scale yet. In my opinion, something like this, in a very tiered fashion, in a tiered structure, could be a better solution than our existing welfare programs, because our existing welfare programs have so many conditions built in that they do sometimes tend to promote passive behavior. Remember, the goal is to make people want to contribute to society, make people want to raise their socio-economic status, make people want to be less passive and elevate themselves, whether it's through more education, starting businesses, taking care of children, being better parents, or whether it's simply contributing back to society, even if you did some non-profit work. So at the end of the day, the solution is going to be different for different people, but a tiered approach, in my opinion, to something like this makes sense, especially given the times that we live in. Should this be a permanent solution? Maybe, maybe not. Should it be a temporary solution, and should there be some sort of an evolution, some sort of a tiered approach, some sort of a more structured approach of the current $2,000 per month proposed stimulus that can help all Americans? Absolutely. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. I appreciate you all. Once again, please click like, please click subscribe. A lot of effort goes into the research and the production of these videos, and I'm looking forward to the comments as well. I'm happy to chime in and give you my input and engage in a healthy, productive debate on this subject. Thanks so much.